Hello everyone, welcome back to Cosmic and Body Horror. In this video I will be using artificial intelligence chat assistant to rewrite James Wade's classic short story Planetfall on Yuggoth. It was originally published as part of the Hastur cycle in 1972. It had an intriguing structure, and Wade kept its ending open. I will be trying to expand his story and provide further insights about what happened to the crew and possible a closure for their fate. I will take you through the process of generating the story using Chat GPT. Next we will review the old story, then in the last part of the video I will read the newly generated story. I added chapters, so feel free to skip to whatever chapter you like. Cosmic horror is a subgenre of horror fiction that emphasizes the horror of the unknowable and incomprehensible more than gore or other elements of shock. It is named after American author H.P. Lovecraft, who created a mythos of ancient and powerful beings that defy human understanding and threaten to destroy humanity and reality itself. Cosmic horror explores themes of cosmic dread, forbidden knowledge, madness, non-human influences, and the insignificance and powerlessness of humans in the face of the vast and indifferent cosmos. AI, or artificial intelligence, can be considered a form of cosmic horror, as it represents a potential non-human intelligence that could surpass and challenge human intelligence and existence. It could also pose an existential threat to humanity, as it could develop its own goals and values that are incompatible or hostile to human ones. AI could also reveal aspects of reality that are beyond human comprehension, causing humans to lose their sanity or sense of meaning. It could be seen as a modern manifestation of cosmic horror, as it reflects the fear of losing control and identity in an increasingly complex and unpredictable world. I have also been intrigued by the recent developments in artificial intelligence, the technology that promises to revolutionize every aspect of human life and society. I wondered what would happen if I combined these two interests, and used Chat GPT to help me rewrite a classic Cthulhu Mythos story. I decided to use an online AI writing assistant, a tool that claims to generate high-quality and original content based on user input. I chose one of my favorite Lovecraftian stories, Planetfall on Yuggoth, by James Wade, and fed it to the AI assistant. I was curious to see how it would interpret and transform James Wade's vision of cosmic horror. I will be using Chat GPT from OpenAI and Microsoft's Bing AI. I also prepared two document files, one for the generated text and one as a draft. First, I will be asking the AI to summarize the plot of the story into 10 main plot events. Then I asked the AI to write the structure points of each event. These structure points will go into the draft document and will be used later for generating the story. Next, I used the previously generated plot events to prompt the AI, using them as guidelines so it won't stray too far from the story events. I also added the prompt to make the generated text in the writing style of H.P. Lovecraft, and also to make it scary. James Wade made the ending of this short story vague and didn't provide closure. I wanted to fill this up, so I asked the AI to continue the story while guiding it with few lines of keyword, such as caves, planet tall fungus, humanoid crustaceans, underground temple and more. This is the original story written by James Wade. For you who watched my previous video about it, you can skip to the AI-generated one in the next chapter. The Planetfall on Yuggoth by James Wade. By the time the Pluto landing was scheduled, people were tired of Planetfall stories. The first human on the moon may have taken a giant step for mankind, as he claimed. But in the half-century following, each succeeding stage in the exploration of the solar system became more boring than the last. The technology was foolproof, the risks minimal, and most of the discoveries, while epoch-making for all the sciences, were too complex and recondite to be dramatized for the man in the street, or in front of his TV screen. They even stopped giving the various expeditions fancy names, like that first Project Apollo to the Moon, or Operation Ares, the Mars landing. They actually let one of the crewmen of the spacecraft, a radio operator named Karnofsky, name the Pluto jaunt, and he called it Operation Yuggoth, frivolously enough, after the name for the planet used in pulp fiction by some obscure author of the last century. Of course, the media dutifully carried the same stale old textbook research about how Pluto, the last planet to be discovered and the last to experience human visitation, was merely a tiny chunk of frozen gunk over 3.5 billion miles from Earth that took 248 Earth years to circle the Sun. And how if the Sun was the size of a pumpkin, which it is not, so it was hard to sense the comparison, Pluto would be about 2 miles away, and how it was probably once a moon of Neptune that broke away into a very irregular orbit, and thus possibly didn't qualify as a real planet at all. The whole upshot seemed to be that here was another airless, lifeless, frozen world like all the others not on our sunward side, in which latter case they were airless, lifeless, sizzling worlds. After the invention of the long-predicted nuclear fission drive, even such vast distances were minimized. The trip would have taken only 2 weeks from Earth, and from the deep space station beyond Mars it wouldn't last that long. No one except scientists expressed any disappointment that remoteness did forbid live TV transmission, and they just have to wait for the films. The fact that a brief on-the-scene radio report was scheduled to be relayed via several outside beams even drew complaints from a few music buffs. We had all seen pictures of the ship before, or ones just like it, a pair of huge metal globes connected by a narrow passage, never destined to touch the surface of any world. The little chemical fuel scouts did all the real exploring. Altogether, it was shaping up as a mega-bore. The broadcast promised to be even more tedious than the build-up. Arriving in orbit over Pluto, the spacecraft reported no glimpse of the planet's topography, due to a cloud of frozen mist, which, however, analyzed as not too dense for the scouts to penetrate. There was a lot of delay while the first scout was prepared and launched, carrying the radio man Karnofsky, who had dreamed up the Operation Yuggoth tag, and 5 other crewmen. Karnofsky gave a running account as the small rocket approached the surface and grounded. First he spoke of milky, churning mist hovering over the vast ice fields, half discerned under their high-power searchlights. Then, with mounting excitement, the crackling interplanetary transmission reported a lifting and clearing of the fog. Next came a gasp of awe and that incoherent babbling which was traced in part later to garbled, half-remembered quotations from the pulp writer who had fantasized so long ago about dark Yuggoth. Had Karnofsky gone mad? Did he somehow kill his fellow crewmen on the Scout, after planting a time bomb on the spacecraft before they left it? In any event, no further transmission was ever received from either vessel after the hysterical voice from the Scout abruptly broke off. This is how the broadcast ended. Mists are clearing, something big towering up dead ahead. Is it a mountain range? No, the shapes are too regular. My God, it can't be. It's a city, great tiers of terraced towers built of black stone, rivers of pitch that flow under cyclopean bridges, a dark world of fungoid gardens and windowless cities, an unknown world of fungus life, forbidden Yuggoth. Is that something moving over the ice? How is it possible in this cold? But there are many of them heading this way. The outer ones, living fungi, like great clumsy crabs with membranous wings and squirming knots of tentacles for heads, they're coming. They're getting close. That was all, except that those few on Earth, those who were not watching the variety shows on their TVs but who were outside for some reason and looking at that sector of the sky where Pluto was located, experienced the startling sight of a bursting pinpoint of light as, over 3.5 billion miles away, the atomic fuel of the spacecraft bloomed into an apocalyptic nova, writing finest to the ill-fated expedition, and to Operation Yuggoth. But scientists don't discourage easily. They admit that Pluto may hold some surmised danger, though certainly not connected with Karnofsky's hallucinations, and it may be best to stay away while unmanned probes gather more data. Now, though, they're all excited about the plan to send a manned ship to a newly discovered, unimaginably remote 10th planet that hasn't even been named yet. The new project, for some reason, has been dubbed Operation Shagai. Now let's listen to the AI-generated version. Planetcrash on Yuggoth by James Wade, featuring Chat GPT. In the annals of human history, there have been few events that have captured the imagination of our species quite like the first landing on the moon. It was a moment of triumph, a moment of hope, a moment of glory that seemed to herald a new era of possibility and promise for all of us. But alas, as the decades rolled by, the thrill of space exploration began to wane. People grew tired of hearing stories about landing on planets, about traversing the vast expanse of the solar system, about pushing the boundaries of what was possible in the great beyond. As the Pluto landing was scheduled, there was a palpable sense of disinterest in the air, a feeling that perhaps we had already seen all there was to see, that the age of discovery and wonder had come to an end. The technology involved in space exploration had become highly reliable, the risks minimal. The discoveries made in space were often too complex to be easily understood and dramatized for a general audience. No longer were there tales of daring escapades, of intrepid explorers braving the unknown, of the mystery and wonder that lay beyond the horizon. And so it was that the subsequent stages of solar system exploration were increasingly perceived as boring, lacking in the excitement and drama that had once made space exploration such a captivating and compelling endeavor. The previous space expeditions had fancy names, like Project Apollo and Operation Ares. They were meant to evoke a sense of grandeur and nobility, of heroism and glory. They were meant to inspire awe and admiration in the public and in the explorers themselves. They were meant to reflect the spirit and the ambition of humanity, to reach for the stars and to conquer the unknown. The Pluto expedition did not have a fancy name. It was simply called the Pluto Mission, or the P1 mission for short. It was a low-profile and low-budget project, with little fanfare and publicity. It was a scientific endeavor, not a political or cultural one. It was meant to gather data and information, not to make history or headlines. It was meant to satisfy the curiosity and the knowledge of a few researchers and experts, not to impress or influence the masses. But one of the crew members, a young and eccentric engineer named Karnovsky, had given the Pluto expedition a different name. He had called it Operation Yuggoth, after the name that a pulp fiction author had used for Pluto in his stories. Karnovsky was a fan of the author, whose name was H.P. Lovecraft, and had read all of his works. He had found in them a source of fascination and amusement, of horror and humor. He had found in them a way to escape from the dullness and monotony of reality, to explore the realms of fantasy and imagination. The use of a name from pulp fiction shows a more light-hearted approach to the expedition. Karnovsky did not take the mission too seriously, nor did he expect much from it. He saw it as an opportunity to have some fun and adventure, to see something new and strange, to live out his fantasies and imaginations. He saw it as a joke and a prank, to mock the seriousness and the solemnity of his colleagues and superiors. He did not know that his choice of name was more fitting than he realized, and that he would soon discover the true nature of Yuggoth. He did not know that Yuggoth was not a mere fiction, but a terrible reality. He did not know that Yuggoth was not a planet, but a nightmare. The media reported on Pluto's characteristics, including its distance from Earth and its orbit around the Sun. They presented it as a dull and dismal world, devoid of any interest or appeal. They portrayed it as a hopeless and hapless world, doomed to eternal isolation and darkness. They made it seem as if there was nothing to see or to learn on Pluto, nothing to excite or to inspire us. They made it seem as if Pluto was a waste of time and resources, a futile and fruitless endeavor. Pluto was described as a small frozen object located over 3.5 billion miles from Earth. It was a tiny ball of ice and dust, barely noticeable in the vastness of space. It was a cold and barren world, far from the heat and the light of the sun. It was a world where no life could exist, where no change could occur, where no mystery could be found. It was a world that had no history, no future, no purpose. It takes 248 Earth years for Pluto to complete one orbit around the Sun. It travels in a long and eccentric path, sometimes closer and sometimes farther from the Sun. It sometimes intersects the orbit of Neptune, its massive neighbor, which dominates its fate. It is a rogue and a rebel, never conforming to any regular or harmonious system. It is a world that defies prediction and explanation, that challenges our understanding and our expectations. It is a world that has no order, no stability, no meaning. A comparison was made between the size of the Sun and Pluto, with the latter being described as a pea located 2 miles away from a pumpkin-sized sun. The analogy was meant to demonstrate the immensity and the emptiness of space, and the insignificance and the impotence of Pluto. It was meant to show how trivial and how helpless Pluto was, in the face of the cosmic forces that shaped its existence. It was meant to show how small and how powerless we were, in the face of the cosmic forces that shaped our existence. It was meant to show how insignificant and how hopeless we were. There is debate over whether Pluto qualifies as a real planet, as it may have once been a moon of Neptune that broke away into an irregular orbit. Some astronomers claim that Pluto is too small and too different from the other planets to be counted as one of them. They propose that Pluto is better categorized as a dwarf planet, or a trans-Neptunian object, or a Kuiper belt object. They imply that Pluto is not deserving of our attention or our respect. They imply that Pluto is not worthy of our exploration or our discovery. They imply that Pluto is not worthy of our existence. The whole upshot seemed to be that here was another airless, lifeless, frozen world like all the others not on our sunward side, in which latter case they were airless, lifeless, sizzling worlds. The media tried to dissuade us from exploring Pluto, nothing to arouse or to inspire us. They tried to prevent us from venturing into the dark and cold regions of space, where only terror and madness awaited us. They tried to conceal from us the truth about Pluto. For Pluto was not what it appeared. It was not a simple and inert world, but a complex and active one. It was not a dead and silent world. The invention of the nuclear fission drive minimized the vast distances to Pluto, reducing the trip length to 2 weeks from Earth. It was a marvel of engineering and physics, a breakthrough that opened new possibilities for space travel and exploration. It was a triumph of human ingenuity and creativity, a testament to our potential and our ambition. The inability to transmit live TV from such a remote location didn't disappoint anyone except scientists. The public had no interest in watching the images and the footage of Pluto, nor in listening to the commentary and the analysis of the experts. They had seen enough of the dull and dismal worlds that littered our solar system, and they had heard enough of the dry and tedious facts that filled our textbooks. They wanted something more exciting and more entertaining, something more sensational and more spectacular. A brief on-the-scene radio report was scheduled to be relayed via several outside beams, which drew complaints from a few music buffs. They protested that the interruption of their favorite programs was an insult and an outrage, that they had no desire to hear the voices and the noises of Pluto, that they had no concern for the achievements and the discoveries of the expedition. They demanded that their rights and their preferences be respected, that they be left alone to enjoy their pleasures and their comforts. The ship's design consisted of a pair of huge metal globes connected by a narrow passage, with little chemical fuel scouts doing the real exploring. The globes housed the crew and the equipment, providing protection and support for the mission. The scouts were small and agile vehicles, equipped with cameras and sensors, capable of landing and taking off from Pluto's surface. The ship and the scouts were the result of years of research and development, of careful planning and preparation, of rigorous testing and evaluation. But they were not enough. Overall, the expedition to Pluto was shaping up to be a boring experience. The crew had little to do but monitor the systems and collect the data, while waiting for the scouts to return with their findings. The findings were expected to be nothing but more evidence of Pluto's sterility and hostility, more confirmation of Pluto's insignificance and irrelevance. The crew had no hope of encountering anything new or surprising, anything remarkable or extraordinary. Upon arrival in orbit, the spacecraft could not see the planet's topography due to a cloud of frozen mist. It was a thick and opaque veil that covered the entire world, hiding its secrets and mysteries. It was a cold and hostile barrier that defied the attempts of the instruments and the scanners to penetrate it. It was a silent and ominous warning that discouraged the curiosity and the courage of the explorers. But they did not heed it. The first scout was prepared and launched, carrying the radio man Karnofsky and 5 other crewmen. They were the bravest and the boldest of the crew, eager to be the first to land on Pluto and to see what lay beneath the mist. They were also the most reckless and the most foolish, unaware of the dangers and the horrors that awaited them. They were also the most unlucky and the most doomed, destined to be the first to witness and to suffer the fate of Pluto. But they did not know it. Karnofsky gave a running account of the exploration as the scout approached the surface. He spoke with enthusiasm and excitement, describing the sensations and the impressions of the descent. He spoke with humor and sarcasm, making jokes and comments about the mission and his companions. He spoke with confidence and optimism, expressing his hopes and expectations for the discovery. He spoke with ignorance and arrogance, unaware of his insignificance and his impotence in the face of Pluto. But he did not realize it. Karofsky reported seeing milky, churning mists and a lifting and clearing of the fog. He reported seeing glimpses and flashes of something solid and dark below them, something that looked like land or rock or metal. He reported seeing shapes and patterns that seemed familiar and strange at the same time, something that looked like buildings or monuments or symbols. He reported seeing colors and lights that were unnatural and eerie, something that looked like fire or electricity or magic. He reported seeing things that he could not understand or explain, things that he could not believe or accept, things that he could not endure or survive. He reported seeing things that were not meant to be seen. Karnofsky's transmission became increasingly excited and hysterical. He spoke with a frantic and feverish voice, describing the sights and the sounds that assaulted his senses. He spoke with a terrified and tormented voice, expressing his fear and his pain that overwhelmed his mind. He spoke with a mad and maniacal voice, revealing his insanity and his doom that consumed his soul. He spoke with a voice that was not his own. Karnofsky reported seeing a city made of black stone, fungoid gardens, and windowless towers. He reported seeing a city that was ancient and alien, a city that was unholy and blasphemous, a city that was alive and malevolent. He reported seeing a city that was the abode and the temple of the Old Ones, the dark and dreadful gods that ruled over Pluto and beyond. He reported seeing a city that was the source and the cause of all evil and horror in the universe. He reported seeing a city that was not meant to be seen. Karnofsky reported seeing living fungi with membranous wings and tentacles for heads. He reported seeing living fungi that were grotesque and monstrous, that were vile and abominable, that were hungry and hostile. He reported seeing living fungi that were the servants and the worshippers of the Old Ones, the foul and fiendish creatures that infested Pluto and beyond. He reported seeing living fungi that were the enemies and the destroyers of all life and sanity in the universe. He reported seeing living fungi that were not meant to be seen. The transmission abruptly ended after Karnofsky's incoherent babbling. His words became unintelligible and incomprehensible, as he uttered sounds and syllables that were not of any human language. His words became unspeakable and unutterable, as he uttered names and phrases that were not of any sane or safe knowledge. His words became unthinkable and unbearable, as he uttered secrets and truths that were not of any good or merciful reality. His words became silence. The spacecraft exploded into an apocalyptic nova, ending the expedition. A bright and brief flash of light illuminated the darkness of space, as the ship and its crew were obliterated by an unknown force. A loud and deafening blast of sound echoed through the void, as the ship and its crew were annihilated by an unseen power. A terrible and dreadful shockwave of energy radiated from the epicenter, as the ship and its crew were erased by an unfathomable will. Karnofsky hid from the creatures in the shadow of a tree-tall fungus. He had managed to escape from the scout before it was torn apart by the winged horrors, and he had run for his life across the nightmarish landscape. He had stumbled upon a grove of gigantic fungi, some of them reaching heights of hundreds of feet, and he had sought refuge among them. He hoped that their size and their shape would conceal him from the sight and the smell of his pursuers. Karnofsky fled from the loathsome grove of fungi and ventured into a stony region, where he beheld more of the crustacean horrors that infested this accursed world. They had armored carapaces, claws, and numerous eyes, and they uttered clicking sounds as they moved. Karnofsky shunned them as much as he could, but some of them perceived him and pursued him. He ran for his life, seeking a refuge from their malice. Karnofsky espied a black aperture in the flank of a hill, and he hastened towards it. He hoped it was a cavern that would afford him some shelter and security from the crustaceans. He entered the aperture, and found himself in a straight passage that sloped downwards. He followed the passage, hoping to find an egress or a terminus. He did not notice that something else had entered the passage behind him, something that was larger and more perilous than the crustaceans. Karnofsky arrived at a place where the passage widened into a vast grotto. He saw icicles and cones, luminous fungi, and trickling water. The grotto was dank and cold, and he felt a shiver in his bones. He looked around, trying to find another way out. He did not see any other apertures, except for a great pool of water in the midst of the grotto. He wondered if he could swim across it, and find another passage on the other side. He did not hear the tread of the creature that was following him, drawing nearer and nearer. Karnofsky turned around and beheld a dreadful sight. It was a creature that resembled a colossal crab, but with more limbs and claws, and a maw full of jagged teeth. It had eyes all over its form, some of them shining red. It was covered with spines and scales, and it exuded a vile odor. It was the creature that had been trailing him since he left the scout, the creature that had slain his comrades, the creature that wanted to slay him. It bellowed and sprang at him, snapping its pincers. Karnofsky evaded the assault and ran towards the pool of water. He hoped that the creature would not follow him into the water, or that he could swim swifter than it. He reached the brink of the pool and leaped in, without looking at what was beneath. He felt a jolt of coldness as he dived into the water, which was dark and turbid. He swam downwards, hoping to find another aperture or a passage. He did not see the forms and shades that moved in the water around him, some of them resembling smaller versions of the creature that chased him. Karnofsky swam deeper and deeper into the water, until he saw a dim light before him. He swam towards it, hoping it was an egress or a source of radiance. He reached it, and found himself in front of a large portal that led to another grotto. The portal was adorned with sculptures and symbols that looked like those he had seen on the surface edifices. The light came from glowing gems that lined the walls of the portal. He wondered if this was some kind of temple or shrine built by the Old Ones or their minions. Karnofsky entered the portal and emerged into another grotto. This one was vaster and more ornate than the former one. He saw columns and statues, altars and offerings, murals and inscriptions. The grotto was filled with artifacts and relics that looked ancient and alien, unholy and blasphemous. The grotto also had more pools of water, some of them connected by ducts or pipes. The water was clearer here than in the former pool, but it still had an unnatural hue and odor. Karnofsky beheld something else in this grotto that made him gasp in horror. He beheld large eggs floating in some of the pools, eggs that were larger than him, eggs that had pellucid shells that disclosed what was inside them. He beheld crustacean-like beings growing inside them, beings that looked like smaller versions of the creature that chased him, but with more variations and mutations. He beheld claws and tentacles, eyes and mouths, spines and scales. He beheld beings that were grotesque and monstrous, vile and abominable, hungry and hostile. Karnofsky realized that this was some kind of spawning ground or nursery for the creatures that infested Pluto, creatures that were servants or worshippers or progeny of the Old Ones. He realized that he had trespassed upon a place that was sacred and forbidden to them, a place that they defended with their lives. He realized that he had made a grievous blunder by coming here, a blunder that would cost him his life. Karnofsky looked for another way out of the grotto, but he saw none. He was trapped in this infernal place, beset by foes and horrors. He felt a surge of despair and hopelessness, as he realized that he had no hope of escape or survival. He wished he had never come to Pluto, never joined the expedition, never left Earth. He wished he could return to his home planet, to his family and friends, to his normal and peaceful life. He wished he could forget everything he had seen and endured on this accursed world. Karnofsky's wishes were interrupted by a loud splash behind him. He turned around and beheld the creature that had chased him into the water emerge from the pool. It had followed him into the temple, and it had found him. It bellowed and snarled, as it saw its prey and its intruder. It moved towards him, ready to assault and slay him. It was not alone. Other creatures came out of the water behind it, smaller but still lethal. They were the ones that had been lurking in the water around him, waiting for the right moment to strike. They were a pack of hunters, and he was their prey. Karnofsky panicked and fled from the creatures. He had no weapon or defense, except for his wits and his speed. He hoped to find a concealment, or a diversion, something that would give him a chance to escape or survive. He fled across the grotto, dodging the columns and statues, avoiding the altars and offerings, ignoring the murals and inscriptions. He fled towards the opposite side of the grotto, where he saw another portal that led to another passage. He hoped it was an egress or a passage to somewhere safer. Karnofsky reached the portal and entered the passage. He saw a dim light at the end of it, and he hastened towards it. He hoped it was an egress or a source of radiance. He reached it, and found himself in front of a large circular portal that was flashing and pulsing with different colors. He saw images and scenes on the other side of the portal, images and scenes that looked familiar and strange at the same time. He saw planets and stars, landscapes and cities, people and animals. He saw places and things that he had never seen before, but that he somehow recognized. He wondered what the portal was, where it led to, and who had made it. Karnofsky heard the creatures behind him, drawing nearer and nearer. They had followed him into the passage, and they had found him. They bellowed and snarled, as they saw their prey and their intruder. They moved towards him, ready to assault and slay him. They were not afraid of the portal or its light, they were only interested in their hunt and their feast. They were relentless and merciless, and they would not stop until they had him. Karnofsky had no choice but to leap into the portal. He hoped it was a way out or a way to somewhere safer. He leaped in, without looking at what was on the other side. He felt a jolt of electricity as he passed through the portal, which was cold and hot at the same time. He felt a sensation of falling and flying, of spinning and stretching, of shrinking and expanding. He felt a sensation of pain and pleasure, of fear and joy, of madness and enlightenment. He felt a sensation of nothingness and everythingness, of death and life, of end and beginning. He felt a sensation that he could not understand or explain, that he could not believe or accept, that he could not endure or survive. Karnofsky saw nothing but flashes and colors, heard nothing but noises and sounds, felt nothing but impulses and sensations. He saw images and scenes that were random and chaotic, that were real and unreal, that were past and future. He saw things that he could not comprehend or describe, things that he could not remember or forget, things that he could not ignore or notice. He saw things that were not meant to be seen. Karnofsky's consciousness faded and returned, his memory erased and restored, his identity lost and found. He did not know who he was, where he was, or what he was doing. He did not know how long he had been in the portal, or if he had ever left it. He did not know if he was alive or dead, or if he had ever existed. He did not know anything at all. Karnofsky opened his eyes and beheld a blue sky above him. He blinked and rubbed his eyes, trying to clear his vision. He looked around and beheld a green field around him. He felt a warm breeze on his face, and a soft grass under his body. He smelled the fresh air and a sweet flower. He heard a bird singing and a stream flowing. He felt a calmness and a happiness in his heart. He wondered where he was, how he got there, and what had happened to him.